excited for today's spectrum of topics. I'm joined by Doug Fulton. He's the principal of Occupier Advisory Services at Avison Young here in the Twin Cities. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. It's nice to spend a little time with you talking about what we do for a living.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for joining. And I've started doing this of recently talking about, how you and I met. And I think we both have a passion for or participating in Cornet, right? Midwest chapter.
Yeah.
We met at the Gala Awards a couple of years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah. It seems like the time has flown by, but as I recall, and Cornet, for those that might not know, is really corporate real estate association. And we have a great chapter in Minnesota bringing together corporate real estate professionals and other companies that help organize and support the corporate real estate department. But I remember hearing a rumor through sort of the social hour that night that someone was at the bar buying drinks for anyone that, quickly got over to the bar. So I ran over and it turned out it was you.
And rumor was true. Rumor was true.
Everybody had a drink in their hands, and then we started talking, and we had done work with your firm before,
anyway, and the rest is history. And the rest is history. And here we are as a guest on a spectrum of topics. So maybe tell us a little bit about background about you for viewers that may not know you. I mean, in the Twin Cities, you're very prominent here, but for viewership that's outside the Twin Cities, maybe share a little bit about your background.
Yeah.
And then kind of how you got into commercial real estate industry.
That's great, and I won't bore people with a long story, but I even grew up in northern Minnesota. But when I went to work in the late '80s, I joined a small real estate company called the Shillard Group, and then really for the past 33 years, I've done mostly work as a tenant rep broker representing companies, mostly in office, industrial, and other corporate real estate assets around the country. My journey has been with different companies. I worked for a bit because we merged with some companies. We sold a couple companies, but I've done work with a company called Grubb & Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, which is one of the largest real estate companies in the world. Today, I work for Avison Young, and I've been here for 10 years. We're a private company, 5,000 employees.
Yep.
We're in 100 offices, 17 countries. And we're a private firm, so we have 700 principals in our firm, and it's been great. In Minnesota, we established our office 10 years ago, and so today in Minnesota, we've got a full slate of professionals that do, provide lots of real estate services to clients.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Okay, so you and your team manage portfolios across the U.S. and the globe. You guys have how many people on your team? 5?
Well, in our office, we've got 15 brokers, and we have a fairly big team within that group. We have 8 brokers, our team, project managers.
Yeah, and you guys really are focusing on the tenant side. So you guys manage a lot of portfolios across the U.S. and the globe. Maybe give us an overview of what's happening nationally. I think that's important to kind of provide a broad spectrum, as you would have it, of kind of what's going on with your clients as it relates to your clients, but maybe real estate industry in general on a national level.
Yeah, well, it's the commercial real estate industry is a very fascinating place to work today, and our team is most of what we do is help companies manage their national portfolios across the country, and most of our work is in North America, the U.S. and Canada, although we can do work around the globe. But we help companies with that might have 20 offices around the country, or that have 200 offices around the country, helping them do lease administration, manage critical dates, help them lease, buy, provide opinions of value. We're really a partner for corporate real estate departments, and because of the fact that we're helping manage portfolios around the U.S., we've got a pretty good sense of what's happening in most of the major markets in commercial real estate. So I would say, generally speaking, as you think about office space, what we're experiencing in Minnesota is what most markets across the country are experiencing. You've got a lot of office space available in most major markets, and particularly in the downtown markets. Okay. Office tenants are continuing to decrease their square footage because of remote work, and there is definitely a flight to quality. So lots of companies are are going from, sort of one level of buildings. If they're moving, they're generally going to a higher quality building today. Industrial space is very high. We have lots of clients with industrial space. Industrial space is really tight. I mean, since the pandemic, if you had a box and you could if you could distribute it out of it, manufacture, do e-commerce, all that has made for a really strong industrial market.
Is that
Canada,
still trending, by the way, from an industrial perspective? Is that still the case? Like, is that the outlook for 24, 25, that industrial still be a very competitive market?
yeah, it's the strongest asset class today. If you
Okay.
think about commercial real estate, I mean, there are markets that you go to today, both in the United States and Canada, where industrial rates are higher than office rates. And Minnesota is not a huge industrial market, but we do have some large industrial developers that are here and
Yeah.
owners. And there are owners, Celeste, today that own flex buildings, which are sort of,
Yeah.
office industrial buildings, and they're pulling out office space to make more industrial space available because they know the office space isn't going to lease and the industrial space will. And
Yeah.
even though there's a little spread in the rental rate, industrial rate is going to lease at some point.
Okay. Do you see it from a national perspective, the office, have we've gotten, I don't like this, there's no other way to put it, but basically bottomed out, right? Like people were kind of saying, oh my gosh, I mean, I've heard it from our side, people understand now they need office space, right? But it's about, to your point, maybe creating some efficiencies within this space and really evaluating that.
Yeah.
Do you kind of think we're at the bottom of that and now we're going to be?
Well, I think companies are, I mean, it's a great question. Companies are starting to figure out what they're going to be in this new remote world of work. And, because we're 4 years past COVID, from the time people went home for 18 months.
Yeah.
And so now leases, if you were in a 3 or 5 year lease, those leases have rolled over or they're in the process of rolling over. So office tenants are determining kind of how much space they're going to need and how they're going to set their space up.
Yeah.
I would say this is that one trend we've seen in a lot of major markets, including Minnesota, is landlords that have office space available are building vacancy out into spec suites.
Okay.
Because that tenants are, the traditional tenant with 25 employees or 50 employees, they don't really have the time today to take a year and look at space, pick a building and then build it out. Many of them are saying, look, we don't know exactly how long a term we want to sign. We kind of know how many people we need to accommodate now. And so landlords are matching up spec suites. They're building space out without a tenant. And then they're leasing that space to a tenant that comes to their building. So this has been a trend that's been happening for 10 years, but it's really gotten very active more so in the last 12 to 18 months.
Interesting. I think people in general, it's about kind of being creative, right? Whether you're a building owner or a tenant for that matter, right? Just kind of be creative with your space. Yeah.
And trying to be nimble and be, if you are design space where you can have 3 or 4 people that work on some space, but if you need to, you can have 15 or 20 people working in that space, trying to make it be space that that will attract people and to be able to be flexible. For sure. Absolutely. We're seeing that, from our chair as a design firm. So how about talking a little bit, I know, okay, that's a good overview of just a national perspective, but maybe a lot of our viewers are here in Minnesota, so maybe let's talk about what's happening in downtown Minneapolis as it relates to office, and we can kind of go over more of an overview of the market too, but maybe just share a little bit of your thoughts. Yeah, I think, I think most major markets were impacted by COVID and remote work and the trends that we've seen since then. Downtown Minneapolis has been impacted more so than most major markets in that we had kind of a double whammy. We had COVID like everyone else did, and employees went home for 18 months. But we also had the riots of 2021. And part of what happened in that case was it just led to a security issue downtown Minneapolis. And so downtown Minneapolis continues to recover. I mean, it's still got lots of tenants downtown. There is a high amount of space that's leased but not occupied. Okay. So as landlords and companies are trying to encourage more and more employees to come back downtown, Minneapolis continues to be, on a distress list in terms of the number of employees that are using using the light rail and transportation systems and going downtown to work. I mean, there are some bright spots downtown.
Yeah.
North Loop it's not a huge market, but it is a market that a lot of companies have sort of been attracted to. There's the newest development downtown, RBC Tower, which is in North Loop, has great lease up. Heinz is building a building called North Green Loop, and that's full. So these submarkets that are on the fringe of downtown have been very successful.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for those companies to fill up, they've attracted tenants mostly from the core of downtown.
Yeah.
So there's been a flight. We talked earlier about a flight to quality. In this case, it's sort of a flight to a market that's got more active amenities today, that's considered to be a better place to attract people to work. So now Minnesota, the suburban market in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that the office market continues to be a place where you're seeing tenants go from Class B buildings to higher quality Class A buildings. So most of the Class A parks that are around Minneapolis, St. Paul are doing fairly well. Because there's been a migration of tenants from a certain quality building to a higher quality building.
So it's kind of overall a flight to quality, whether it's in downtown or out in the suburbs. That's for our building. We're in Centennial Lakes. That's where our office is, and it's full.
Yeah. So you're in that project is mostly full. It's got lots of amenities, but part of what's happened in our market and other markets is that you've had major employers that have made a decision to consolidate their office space because a lot of it was unoccupied. So you look at United Healthcare has given back 1 million square feet of space in the suburbs. Between United Healthcare, Best Buy, and the banks, there's 3 million square feet of vacant office buildings that are now in the suburbs that weren't here, before 2020. So all of that real estate is going to have to get filled either through conversions, some other use, or just through reimagining or reinvesting in those buildings to turn them back into multi-tenant buildings where they can get leased. And I can guarantee you that as we take clients and look at the market today, there are very few buildings that have vacancy today, in significant vacancy today, that aren't owned by a landlord or an owner that has done a plan to invest significant dollars in those buildings to put amenities in place to attract tenants. I mean, it's cafes, it's conference rooms, it's fitness centers, tenant lounges, bars. There's a lot of investment that's going into commercial real estate today to make sure that every building gets a look at tenants that are in the market.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to do a little plug here. I'm moderating a Cornet meeting about this topic. It's kind of one of the bright spots. It's at Capella Tower. They invested in a significant amount of money in their amenity space. We're going to have one of our clients. We did a project in Bremer on 47th floor. They have a commitment to downtown, right? I think you kind of hit on that. There's businesses that I think have to kind of come together and be committed to downtown and making it successful. And then Sarah Anderson with BOMA, she's down there going to share some of her insights. And then Larissa at CBRE, who obviously manages that building, has done a great job. But I think it's one of the key themes, not to overshare about the meeting coming up on March 12th, but it's basically going to be about activating the space too. So how important is it to have a tenant, but then have a great property manager on there to be able to manage those tenants and manage issues that arise. So it's kind of all encompassing, and it's taking kind of everybody. So
well, and if you're moderating that program, it'll be a great program. I can't wait to go to it. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. So Any great case study you can share with our viewers about an organization you've helped kind of navigate? You talked a lot about and gave really good overview around what's kind of happening in real estate, but maybe walk us through a great case study of an organization you helped kind of navigate through these current market.
Sure. Well, and I'm happy to let me just talk about a couple of projects that we're in process with, and I might not refer to the specific companies, but I can refer to their industry and what size they are. Back in 2019, our team represented a major software company headquartered in Minnesota, lease space 4 floors of a new building in North Loop. We kicked off a new office building, and of course, what happened is COVID hit, and the employees all went home for 18 months. And in their case, figured out many of them could work without coming back to the office. So this company had to quickly pivot and say, look, we don't need 4 floors of office space. We
Sure.
only need one.
Mhm.
So we ended up helping them, our company did, then sublease 3 floors. And because it was in a market like North Loop, which was very attractive, within 9 months, we ended up leasing all that space. And all the companies that are now in that building in that base are doing great. So
Yeah.
it's an example of how you react to a market and create a different transaction, real estate transaction that
Yeah.
helps support the business depending on what your situation is. So we're working with another company in the southwest suburbs today, suburban Minneapolis, that has 300 employees, and they've outgrown their current building. And we're out looking at new spaces today.
Okay.
This is an interesting company because all their employees come to work Monday through Friday. So
Wow.
as we're looking at moving into higher quality buildings for additional recruiting, and because they're at a point where they're building their image even higher, there are lots of landlords that are chasing this tenant, and all of these buildings are understandably advertising new amenities, investment that's gone into their space, signage, all the things that you would expect. But
Yeah.
what's interesting today, Celeste, is that there is a factor that as you're looking at office buildings today that you never really thought about in the past 30 years that I've been doing this business. And that is, what kind of a culture and how much energy is in a building today, a multi-tenant building today? That's a big issue, because
Yeah.
there's lots of buildings today that have had big tenants in them for a long time. Those tenants their employees haven't come back to the office. So
Yeah.
if you're going to go lease 20% of a larger building, and you want to know how much
Yeah.
energy is in that building. Is it
For
enough
sure.
to support the cafeteria? Is it enough to just, when your employees come to work, feel like they're not in an empty building?
For
So
sure.
it's just an interesting factor that landlords are thinking about today, and will
For
continue
sure.
to be one of those things that every company that's building their culture and their space in this market is going to look at. So I think there's lots of ways to be able to create a great space for your employees to come to work at today, but it's different for every company.
For sure. Absolutely. I think we're seeing a lot of the common themes that you're talking about, right? It's
Mhm.
about an overall employee experience, not only as it relates to the office, but I think it's kind of putting some ownership back to the owners of the buildings to say, okay, how are you going to activate this space? So we're definitely seeing those trends.
One thing you don't have to worry about today that used to be an issue you used to think about was, how many parking, do you have enough parking in this building for your employees?
See, there's bright
There's
spots. There's
there's
bright
lots of parking
spots.
today. There's no
There's
stopping
bright
filling.
spots for sure. See, like very positive. Yeah. Now more than ever, organizations are kind of having to lean on experience that you and your team have to kind of help guide their real estate strategies for the future, right? That kind of goes without saying. I think it's critical. What's one piece of advice would you give a company kind of at the start of that process assessing their space needs, real estate footprint?
Yeah, well, I think I would say, we covered this a little bit earlier, but I think companies today need to be flexible, creative, and know your landlord. So
Yes.
flexibility will allow you to be able to get into a building, consider a building, and be able to flex your footprint depending on how your employee mix is today. Develop furniture systems that encourage employees to collaborate and want to spend time together with other coworkers. So I think, be flexible. I think be creative in ways in terms of, trying to make sure your employees are looking at your office space as a place they want to come back to. Best Buy is bringing a big part of its corporate campus in Richfield back to the market. It's multi-tenant office space today. And as a company, Best Buy has done a great job in terms of bringing back its employees. It's created lots of creative programming throughout the week. And, I think they brought back almost 50% of their workforce most days of the week.
Wow.
And so I think companies, go into this process of being creative and that will set you up for success as you look at what you're doing with how you design your space and how you use it. And then, I would say know your landlord. And, there's going to be buildings today, as we've talked about the commercial market, there are going to be buildings that don't make it. I mean, there are going to be Class B buildings that go into default and other buildings that means that some services that those buildings have today, they're not going to have in the future or for some period of time. And so understanding how well capitalized your landlord is really important. And when your landlord asks to see your financials as a tenant, don't be afraid to ask the landlord to see their financials too.
Right.
So it's a really interesting time as companies are figuring out how they're structuring their headquarters and their culture going forward. But it's also a very exciting time too. We helped the Minnesota Chamber, let me just say, Minnesota Chamber Organization relocate their headquarters a couple of years ago in the middle of COVID. And, it was a way of taking a space and creating neighborhoods and using creative furniture systems to allow that company to be very flexible in terms of giving people a chance to come back and how they work together.
Yeah.
That was very successful. But I would say, lastly, younger employees today, they want to have flexibility where they a lot of them can drop into a coffee shop, they can drop into a office space, they can drop into their client space, they can work from anywhere. So we're in a world where we're going to have to create flexibility for our workforce.
Definitely. And I mean, we're very aligned in that regard. And that's kind of what we're seeing too, just kind of creating some flexibilities like within the space. So speaking of Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, we attended the session priority.
It was great. That was a fun night.
Yeah, that was super fun. I've never participated. So thank you again for inviting us. I think it's really fascinating to see and understand from the business's perspective, what kind of their goals and how that relates to our local government and that. So that was very interesting to see. For those that didn't attend, maybe share some key takeaways that, they'd be maybe interested in learning about, or share maybe what's on the horizon from that perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, I was on the Minnesota Chamber Board for 6 years and part of the executive committee for most of that time. So it's a great organization. It's one of the most active lobbyist organizations in Minnesota today. It represents small and large businesses, helping create policies that make Minnesota a great place for businesses to grow jobs. And, if you think about Minnesota, we've been, for as long as Minnesota has been a state, we've had an advantage in terms of creating jobs. We've had a great labor force. We've got water, rivers. We have one of the best education systems in the country, one of the best healthcare systems. So all of that has really led over time to Minnesota being one of the strongest, business states in the country. That has been impacted in the past 10 to 20 years. We used to have 25 Fortune 500 companies today. Today, we're down to 16. And a lot of businesses that start here tend to grow elsewhere if they're growing either manufacturing or in some other aspect of the business, because Minnesota has a high tax structure and a high regulation structure relative to other states. So I have always encouraged my peers, my colleagues, my clients to just stay informed about how Minnesota sets its policy and how it spends your money. So we want a state environment that is a great place to raise our families with lots of the natural resources we have. We also, families need jobs in
Yep.
order to raise families, and the chamber's helping do that. So that meeting, which is the kickoff every year to the legislative session, is really a great way to look and
Oh,
see
yeah.
how are the legislators and the governor thinking about, where
Aligned.
to prioritize, where we spend our money. So I'm glad you like that. I would
Okay.
say just continue to make your voice heard to everyone about, how to make and keep Minnesota competitive for creating jobs.
I think that was the theme, right? I think sometimes when you say political or all of that, but for me, it was interesting to see the theme of everybody coming together, right? Regardless of their affiliation, coming together with the best interest of making this a place to that businesses and organizations want to grow, want to kind of thrive in. I thought that was great to see and be and witness that. That was very nice to see. So, yeah.
Right.
So throughout our conversation, it's been clear you're very much a subject matter expert in real estate industry. But what else would you say your expertise translates into? What do you think you're a subject matter expert in as it relates to your hobbies?
Oh, geez. Well, I thank you for asking that question. I would love to keep talking about real estate, but I know we probably got to bring this podcast to a close. But well, here's what I would say. I love my job. I'm passionate about real estate. I'm passionate about working with our team and making sure that we're successful, our firm's successful, our team
Yeah.
is successful at solving challenges. But I'm passionate about my family and raising 4 kids. And as I think about, where I have spent, probably more time than anywhere else when I'm not working with my family in the past 15 years, it's been, I would say, in scouts. 3 of our kids have gone through the scouting program. My 2 sons are Eagle Scouts, and then 5 years ago, the Boy Scouts of America. And by the way, I got involved when my oldest son joined scouting 14 years ago, and have
Okay.
been scoutmaster, for the past 14 years, and thought I was almost done with scouting and weekend camping until
Yeah.
the Boy Scouts of America restructured 5 years ago and said, we want a girls program. So we have BSA scouting for boys, and we now have BSA scouting for girls, and girls can get on a path and become an Eagle Scout. And of course, my daughter, our
Yeah.
last kid, was 12 years old, and we said, well, look, let's start a troop at our parish and organization. And I'm really proud to say, in 5 years, we have created a very successful girls troop, BSA
Oh,
girls, and we have 6 girls have earned their Eagle Scout rank, and we have another 3 or 4 in the pipeline, including our 16-year-old daughter, who's now a Life Scout, that will be an Eagle Scout by this summer. Scouting for me is it's really a great place to spend time with kids and to teach kids great lessons.
yeah.
And I've hiked it through New Mexico with my boys. I've paddled many lakes in the Boundary Waters with all my kids. Anna and I and our son spent a week last summer at a deserted island off of Key West. So if I think about, outside of work and my family, where I'm most passionate, I'd
Yeah.
say it's in scoutings, and eventually, and that probably won't change for a long time. But maybe I'll get back to doing a little more golf and fishing if I get my weekends back.
Okay. That's awesome. I think
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I didn't know that. That's great. I wasn't aware of your involvement with the scouts and that, because I think that's really cool because you're teaching um children or kids at a young age, kind of building that great foundation that's going to take them and set them on the right path
That's
for the
right.
rest of their life. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I
And
really
did you get through scouting when you were a young lady?
no, no, we were a sports family, so I played a lot of sports. Like I grew up playing golf. I've been playing golf since I was 10. This is back when girls didn't like play golf at all, because
Right,
I'm
right.
now sharing my age.
Yeah.
But like I remember going to junior PGA tournaments in the summer, and I was driving myself there as a 16-year-old girl, but there was no other girls to participate, and I'd have to be with the 12-year-old boys.
Wow. Well,
I know, I'm
that's
like, okay, well, can't I be with the 16-year-old boys? And they're like, no, you gotta. I'm like, okay, whatever.
yeah,
But that sport's come a long way, and
yeah.
again,
Right.
love to be a part of that and that. But I really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise in this industry. I've always thought very highly of you and your team, and just the knowledge that you have and the ability to kind of create a great strategy for the organizations. And like I said, I think now more than ever, businesses need to rely on people like yourself to really kind of set that great path forward for
Yeah.
organizations.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing information about our industry, and this podcast. Social media is a great way to do that. So
Yeah.
maybe next time we'll pick another subject to talk about. Be good.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Celeste.
Right. We could, maybe we like divert and go, okay, what else do we want to talk about? Scouts.
We could
Like,
do
I don't
something
know much about
something
scouts.
without waters with our family.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's great.
Well, thanks,
Good.
Doug.
All right. Sounds good. See you soon. Take care. See you at the Coronet meeting on March
12th.
12th. Got it. See you
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
All right.